They need to always have the last word. They always have to be right.
In my head.
They can both seem very stubborn, very self-absorbed, kind of distant and cold from us. I'm talking about NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder, and OCPD, Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder. Why is it that they seem this way? Why are they so similar? And what's the difference between the two? We had a time change recently here, and the weather is not cooperating with me. The sun is not out today, so I'm going to have to rush through this. I apologize if I'm a little bit fast. You can hit the speed on your YouTube. If you hit the little gear and hit the speed setting, you can slow it down. Now, when I look at personality disorders, I like to look at the traits that make up those disorders. This is a particular model you'll find in the back of the DSM in section 3, DSM-5. And when we look at obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD, the personality traits that we see are intimacy avoidance, so not getting too close to people, restricted affectivity, which means that you don't show a lot of emotion, you don't necessarily feel a lot of emotion. You have perseveration, which is continuing to do things past the time that they're useful, and this is what we think of usually with OCD and people washing their hands repeatedly, but that's not limited to OCD. It's a trait that anybody can have, and in OCPD, we see it when we continue to do things past the time of when they're useful. And the last trait that we see is rigid perfectionism, which is kind of what the core, I think, of OCPD is. It's following these rules and having to do them right and having to do them perfectly. Now, with narcissistic personality disorder, we have a different set of traits. We have grandiosity and attention seeking that make that up. Grandiosity being that you feel above other people, that you're always the best of things, and attention seeking just trying to get people to pay attention to you, like we all do to some extent. But when it comes to narcissistic personality disorder, it's a pattern. All of these traits are patterns when it comes to personality disorders. So one obvious difference between the two disorders, and I was very confused about the difference myself. I didn't know a lot about OCPD, so I had to learn these things, but one major difference is that somebody with OCPD can criticize themselves, and one of the things that they're probably going to criticize themselves about is not being able to follow these rules, not being able to live up to those rules that they feel are so important. And these are arbitrary rules. They're just rules that have to do with that person. They're not particular the rules, although they may line up with things that we all would think of as rules. But when they don't meet those standards, when they don't follow those habits, those rules, those patterns that are so important to them, they might criticize themselves for that, and they might get down on themselves for not being able to accomplish it. Now, that's not to say that people with NPD never criticize themselves. Of course they can, but they're much less likely to admit it to people on the outside. And when they criticize themselves, it's probably for also not meeting a standard, but it's more about not being able to get people to understand how better they are at things. It's not necessarily living up to some kind of rule or standard that they have inside. It's getting other people to know that I'm the best and you should be paying attention to me. They might criticize themselves for not being able to do that. Somebody with OCPD is probably going to have a hard time giving up tasks. They feel like they need to be done their way, and they don't like to give those away to other people to do because they know the right way to do it, and they don't trust other people to be able to do that. Somebody with narcissistic personality disorder may be very happy to give you a task because they're above that task. They don't need to be doing that thing. Why should they have to do it? Because they're the best and they're entitled to things, so why should they be doing that thing? They'll be happy to delegate it out to you and sit back and watch. I think you could probably characterize what we talked about so far as somebody with OCPD is always seeking perfection and trying to achieve perfection, whereas somebody who has NPD, they feel like they've already achieved it. They don't really need to prove it to you. Now, somewhat along that same line, somebody with OCPD might get very absorbed in their work and feel like they need to be working on this task. That's part of that perseveration. Like they feel like they need to be doing it all the time. Whereas somebody with NPD, again, they may not really care about the work. They just feel like getting recognition for the work, but they don't care about doing the work so much. You might, however, see somebody who has NPD involving themselves at work, trying to put themselves as the boss at work, or maybe they are the boss. And because of that, they may spend a lot of time at work because they like to feel like they are superior to people, and work may give them that. Now, I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself here, and in some ways I am, but somebody who has OCPD, they're going to get caught up in those rules. They're going to get caught up in wanting to do things to perfection, whereas somebody with NPD, when they're working on something, they may not care about doing it right. They may not really care about doing even a good job on it. They just want the recognition for doing it. And because of all of this, somebody with NPD may not even initiate tasks to begin with because they feel like they're above them. They feel like there's no need for them to do that, and people who are lower than them, which is pretty much everybody, are the ones who have to deal with that stuff. They don't have to do it. Now, somebody with OCPD, Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, they may have trouble having intimate romantic relationships because to get close to somebody means that they have to get somebody else to follow their rules, and that's very threatening to them because the other person doesn't know how to do things the way that they want them to do them, and they don't know the perfect way to do it because it's always the person with OCPD who knows. And so to get close and to get intimate causes a lot of friction and a lot of pain for everybody involved. Somebody with Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD, they're going to have superficial relationships with people. So they'll have relationships with people. They'll just use people as what's called an extension of themselves, and they'll see people as reasons to show other people how great they are, and they put this other person that they're in a relationship with up on a pedestal because that person is a reflection to everybody else of how great and superior they are. So they use that person to demonstrate their superiority, but there's no intimate relationship going on there. In fact, usually somebody with Narcissistic Personality Disorder feels entitled to many relationships, and they like feeling sexual because they like people looking up to them and seeing them as some kind of sexual god or goddess or whatever. And so they'll go out and they'll sleep around with people, they'll cheat on their partners. Not to say that they're the only people who do this, and not to say that everybody that has NPD does this, but it's a pattern because it's what they believe. They believe they deserve attention, they believe that they are superior, and so why not have multiple sex partners and why not have multiple relationships? And again, they're always superficial because to get intimate means you have to be challenged, you have to learn to cooperate with somebody, and somebody with NPD has a hard time doing that because they need to always have the last word, they always have to be right. Now with OCPD, we have that restricted affectivity, and we don't see a lot of emotional expression because it's hard to express emotions when you have to follow rules. They tend to stay up here in their thinking brain, and they don't allow those emotional feelings to come up, and they don't express them as well because they're stuck on following the rules and following the pattern. And sometimes when you get caught up in that, there's no access to your emotions. Somebody with Narcissistic Personality Disorder, they may display emotions, however, and typically I think with both NPD and OCPD we might see rage. I think generally in the population we are more comfortable expressing anger for some reason, but with NPD they'll express love because they feel like they fall in love with somebody, and because that person is their idol, that person's going to show everybody else how great they are, and that person's going to shower them with love. So there's like this mirroring of feelings, but it's not actually a true expression of feelings when it comes to Narcissistic Personality Disorder. It's these superficial relationships that bring about feelings, and I'm not saying that they're not real feelings, it's just that they're always at a superficial level, and as long as that person isn't challenging the person with Narcissistic Personality Disorder, then they'll express more emotions. They'll express love and frustration and anger and everything else that everybody else expresses. And again, this is because somebody with NPD is entitled to express those emotions, and really everybody is entitled to express those emotions, but somebody with NPD is not really going to feel like they have to follow some kind of rules and express them a certain way. Where somebody who has NPD has trouble with emotions is when they start to feel like those emotions somehow make them look bad, when they start to feel like those emotions make them look below somebody else. So if they feel like being vulnerable, being emotional is going to make them look weak, is going to make them look less than other people, and this is very often true for people who have NPD, then they're not going to show emotions in those cases, but they will express emotions probably more often than somebody with OCPD. Now, of course, there's always the possibility that somebody has OCPD and NPD. They've got Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder and Narcissistic Personality Disorder. And remember, we're talking about personality traits here, so people can have a mixture of any kind of these personality traits. They don't have to have a disorder to behave in some of these ways. I hope that that's cleared up some confusion. I apologize for the barking dogs. I can't really help that. If you want to learn more about your own mental health, head on over to youtube.com/RyanLiberty. Hit subscribe. Thank you to my patrons who make videos like this possible. If you'd like to become a patron yourself and help me in my mission of humanizing mental health, head on over to Patreon. The link will be down below. And now I'd love to hear from you, especially if you're somebody who has NPD or OCPD. Have you seen these qualities in yourself? Does this help to clear things up for you? Do you have any more questions? Leave those down below. Our community will be able to help you. Thank you as always for joining me out here, and I'll see you around next time, everybody.